Hey, good people. My name is Torsten Moritz, technically Dr. Torsten Moritz. I never use my title except on some days when I feel like it, and let me tell you why I feel like it sometimes. So this morning, for instance, or was it last night? I can't remember. I was commenting on something theological on Facebook in somebody's thread, and somebody responded to me and saw the need to teach me my craft. And you know, that's fine. We need to learn from one another. We need to teach one another. But when people make it sound like they're the ones who are the experts, and you who actually are an expert are treated by them as if you were not, you know, that's sometimes a little hard to swallow, especially when you imagine the people who are reading all this and who don't have a way of navigating all that. I mean, we live in an age where experts are not really taken all that seriously anymore, at least in some segments of the population. And the reasons for that are shamelessly political, we know that. So when experts and scientists, for instance, when they afford you the possibility of having fantastic gadgets and an amazing car and your HVAC system or whatever, solar energy or whatever the case may be, then we say hooray and we sort of embrace them. But the moment they say something that conflicts with us philosophically or politically, suddenly we know better. It's a little bit ridiculous, really. Why am I talking about this? Oh, because I don't use my title normally, but in this case I do, because if you don't know me, you might think this guy doesn't need to be listened to. As for you, up to you to decide. But just for the record, because of the kinds of encounters I sometimes have, yes, I've got that PhD from the University of London. Yes, I've had many PhD students myself. Most of them are published. I taught for decades in universities in different countries and so on. That doesn't mean I'm infallible, but it means that maybe it's okay to listen to an unusual take on theological matters when a guy like myself offers it. So what's my topic today? My topic today is pretty simple, and I think we'll have to break it up a bit. I've been asked a lot lately, what do seminaries have to do to get better? And I've been known to be harsh on seminaries, and I will continue to be harsh on seminaries because they never change, and their old way, or the change is minimal. And more like superficial and, you know, marketing inspired more than substantive. But as much as I keep saying those things, and as much as I keep talking about alternatives being needed, the one that I'm providing is called Warehouse Theologies or warehousetheology.com. Despite all of that, the reality is I'm super interested in dialoguing with seminaries and getting us, all of us, to a better place. It is embarrassing how we have not changed, we have not gotten better. We've just tried to become more efficient. We're super bloated, most of our institutions, and so we're being forced into some sort of change. COVID forced us into some sort of change, but that's not real. That's not genuine. That doesn't come from either here or here. That comes from the checkbook situation. And I just want to be understood when I say I am someone who criticizes seminaries and who knows the landscape really, really well in at least 3 countries in a lot of depth, including this one. I criticize seminaries a lot. At the same time, I would love it if seminaries finally started getting better at what they do. But that's going to require real change, and I have my doubts as to whether they're willing to do it. Okay, so I've had a lot of questions about this lately, and I haven't been posting for a long time because life happens, and life is even more important than YouTube algorithms. So anyway, I figured this is a good time to come back in and to start talking about these things again. The context to this is that some of the people who have approached me about this are actually movers and shakers in the world of seminaries, and I applaud them for reaching out to someone like me who basically said a few years ago, I'm going to do a different thing because I don't believe that actual change is going to happen within the system as we have it. And yet there are these people who are coming to me and who are basically saying, talk to us, say whatever you want, and we're going to listen. And I think that's fantastic, and I have nothing but respect for people like that who are still in that system, but who really are still hoping for change. And if they're more optimistic about that than I am, then all power to them. If I can help, I certainly will. All right, so where do we go with this? So what I did was I took a bunch of these things that were brought to me and people wanted my opinion, and I classified them a little bit, not in a particular order, just sort of topically. And the first one I have right here, I have decentralization / theology / in the world / priesthood of all believers / narrative credibility. What's all that about? Well, it's about the fact that I'm utterly convinced, and I think the New Testament evidence is overwhelming for this, that Jesus came to decentralize the very notion of God's people. And despite the fact that that was overturned basically for about, 1950 of the last 2,000 some years. Okay, a little bit less than that technically, but you get the idea. Despite the fact that we've been going in a completely different direction with it, and have ended up with a notion of God's people that basically runs counter to what Jesus actually died to create, if you want to use the language of, for instance, Ephesians 2. Despite that, the fact is that in our theological education, we have actually made the same mistake. We may see that mistake being made in churches, but then you would think that theologians would know better. They would go to the New Testament and they would say to themselves, okay, wait, for starters, I'll just give one example. We could probably look at about 50 more. I'll give one. We have now in the New Testament the priesthood of all believers. Okay, and yet churches behave as if we didn't, and seminaries still behave as if we didn't. So all of them, churches and seminaries, are becoming increasingly irrelevant. I think not least because of that. There are plenty of other reasons, don't get me wrong, but that is a big one. That is a major one. I actually have a book, except I was just looking for it. I was going to hold it up and I can't find it. And in cases like that, I always suspect my PhD students, because they take my books and they know that I don't care, and then I may or may not get them back. So if you're a PhD student who has the book I'm about to mention, I'm coming for you. No, I'm not. I don't even know who you are. Well, I know you guys personally, of course, all of you, but I don't know who has that book. And here's another secret. After this, I'm going to go back to the bookshelf and OMG, it's right there. So, and then I'm going to feel bad for suspecting you guys. All right, so back on topic. The book that I have in mind is called, and I never read it, I just bought it for the title, The Priesthood of Some Believers. Bam, there you have it, The Priesthood of Some Believers. Love, love, love that title, because that's exactly what we have, and that's what we have in churches, and that's what we have in the world of theological education, and nobody gives a rip. And the fact that the New Testament is actually doing the opposite of that, nobody seems to care about. Because it seems that the purpose of the New Testament is not to be interpreted well by us and implemented, but apparently the purpose of the New Testament is so that we can ignore it where we don't agree with it, or we can re-author it where we don't agree with it, or we can just go close our eyes and go la 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 la, so that we're not actually exposing our senses and our brains to what the New Testament is actually doing. And what the New Testament is actually doing is to decentralize this notion of God's people. That's the very foundation of the cross, or the cross is the very foundation of decentralization, and that's how we end up with a mandate to actually be in the world and not to be in some compound. Sorry when I call campuses compounds, they both start with See? We're supposed to be in the world. It's a matter of narrative credibility. It's just not good enough to leave out the beginnings of this whole Christian worldwide movement and simply jump in 100 years later and pretend that the earlier stuff just didn't happen. It's not good enough. It's not going to fly. And we live in a time today where people are looking at this kind of thing and are saying, hey, we're interested in origins, for instance. What are the origins of Christianity? Why do some people say, like this guy, I'm all for Jesus. It's the church that's the problem, or the church is. Why does this happen? People have those kinds of questions, and we should have an answer. And you know what? We don't. Unless we do, because we're changing the way we operate. But when does that ever happen? So this is my first question here, or response to the question about why I keep going on about decentralization, about a theology of being in the world, not withdrawn from it, about doing this whole God's people thing in a way that is co-creative, where everybody brings something to the table, and where it's not run top down, and it's not just another empire or another mini empire in the series, in a whole constellation of bigger empires, whether it's whether it's denominations or whatever the case may be. It's not good enough. That stuff is not good enough. People don't give a rip anymore, and all power to them for not giving a rip anymore. If we cannot go back to origins, and I don't mean this in a naive way, because I know somebody's going to put in the comments, and by all means comment, by all means disagree, but somebody's going to put there, are you a primitivist? That would be someone who feels like we have to kind of copy what they did in the first century, and then you say no, and then this person says, because they didn't have bicycles at the time, but we used bicycles. Actually, I wish we did. We used bicycles, so we cannot just copy what they did. Okay, yes, I know. No, I'm not a primitivist. What I'm saying is that if Jesus died to create realities in this world that were worth going to the cross for, then we have a choice to make. We can say, yes, I want to live in a way that is, the technical term might be cruciform, like uniform, but with cruci is the cross, cruciform. I want to live in a way that reflects that, including selflessness instead of selfishness and so on. But one of those key pieces that he died to create in terms of a newly created or recreated humanity, and the New Testament is super clear on this, is decentralization, where you don't have this goal of bringing more people to your church, to your compound, because there are two kinds of compound. There are the theological schools, they're campuses, and they have a campus, and then there are churches, and they have their own compounds, and we're saying to the world, hey, you got to come here, and then kind of be like us. No, it's not good enough. And it has no connection, that has no connectivity with what actually happened at the time. Hey, I'm not a primitivist. I'm not somebody who says we should copy what they did. No, but we got to be in some narrative, some substantial narrative continuity with what Jesus did. Otherwise, what's the point? Okay, I think I'm going to stop here. I have a gazillion points here, and this is going to be a super long video if I don't stop here. And then we'll pick it up again next time. So this first point was decentralization. The priesthood of all believers, not some. That surely has to make a big difference for seminaries. For churches too, but when are they going to change? They take their cue from the corporate world, and they want to survive, and they want to get bigger, and so on. But if you know of a church that actually wants to decentralize itself for real, get rid of that pyramid with the leadership at the top, the human leadership at the top, And I don't mean just flip it upside down, because who cares? It's still a pyramid. And say, oh, our leaders are servants from below, blah, blah. That's not what I'm talking about. If somebody really wants to decentralize their church, they're doing it, I want to hear about it, and then we'll pick it up with the next point next time.